Talking with Howard Shelly is always a treat. He has such vast experience in the outdoors, filming for many years with Mort, Neff. And today, Howard, you brought some film with you on ruffed grouse, and a magnificent specimen here. Ruffed grouse like this you're liable to see in the woods in this posture in the spring, right?
Oh, very typical in the spring, May, and it's an ideal time to do good dog work, both on ruffed grouse and especially those that are interested in banding some woodcock in the spring. Working in the aspen in the typical brush areas is an ideal time to see them, and of course it's the perfect habitat for those birds.
Well, let's go to your film, Howard, and learn a little bit about grouse and woodcock.
Well, here's that scene of a ruffed grouse on a drumming log. And frequently in the spring you may hear that strange noise. It sounds somewhat like a farmer's gasoline engine as it puts away. And then as you search around, you find tracks in the sand along a backwoods trail. You see the birds. And if you're quiet, you may be fortunate in getting a picture of them. But then, to go one step farther, let's look into the big north woods, where it's a very typical habitat area, and that ruffed grouse will return to the same log, the same spot on that log, and of course it's known as the drumming log, and that means May, when he's trying to find a mate, and at periods of about every 4 minutes, you'll hear that strange, prolonged drumming of the ruffed grouse. It only takes 8 or 10 seconds each time, and somehow or other he will find that female. A new family will soon be on its way. And then it was only shortly thereafter, in searching through the woodlands, when we come upon what we know now as Crazy Sam. I'm sure those that's interested in ruffed grouse have heard of the very many peculiar things that happens in the spring of the year. Somehow or other, frequently they're attracted to a strange noise or sound. And in this case, just our merely driving the car along a backwoods country trail attracted the ruffed grouse, and he'd come out to the point where actually we were within 6 or 8 or 10 feet of him on many occasions. Not just once, but several times. Easy to get up close enough to get a good picture of him. And then, finally, he would slowly disappear back into the bush. And again, during May, you'll hear that drumming noise repeated time and again. That means he's searching for and looking for a mate. And it's shortly after that, in searching through the backwoods, that we come across an old bent-over pine stump. And down at the bottom, right beneath the edge of the ground, there is Mrs. Ruffed Grouse on the nest. Already 8 or 10 eggs in that nest. And within another 3 or 4 weeks, 23, 24, 25 days, we'll have a brand new family of baby ruffed grouse throughout the area. Now let's go along with our good friend Tom Project and that famous old English setter, Rock, and put on a demonstration as he's searching for woodcock and grouse during the month of May on a little experimental project of banding the birds. Rock is one of the greatest.
Well, Tom, of course, Rock is not alive anymore, his great gun dogs, but he does have other dogs now, and you know, he's one of the top woodcock banders in the state every year.
Yes.
Bands
At one time he banded over 400 in one spring and gained a national recognition for his work in banding woodcock.
This is just part of the much research that's done in Michigan on wildlife.
Right. Typically of Rock, he likes to mosey across that stream, but if you'll watch closely here in the shin tangle of tag alders, frequently he'll go on a point, and maybe Tom won't be able to get there in time, but Rock will do his utmost to hold that point. Now here you see he'd pointed a woodcock. Then the Mrs. Woodcock flew away before Tom actually got close enough to slap the net down and catch the bird. Now let's move into this area. Rock is right on the scented trail of a woodcock. And a beautiful point. Seldom will you see anything quite like the next scene that you're going to see right here, because Rock has that woodcock pinned down to the point. The bird is less than 10 or 11 inches from the end of Rock's nose.
Right on top of it.
How about that?
That takes restraint to train a dog that way that can...
Then, of course, the bird goes fluttering away. Now, nearby is an area where Tom refers to it as the evening dancing ground. On the way again, suddenly, a grouse right in front of him, and he can't resist the temptation to make another good point. We see the grouse moving slowly about. Rock gets a little bit closer, and the bird flies away. But this is where the woodcock put on their evening show for the females. They'll fly high in the sky, dart, and then almost dive straight down to the ground in such areas as this, which is real close to good woodcock cover. It's something that takes place every spring during the mating season of the woodcock.
Well, the birds at that time of year are rather reckless, like Crazy Sam is. A little easier to get close to. In the fall, it's a different story.
Different story entirely.
Howard Shelley's going to be back in just a minute. Well, Howard, these little grouse that we see drumming in the spring are quite different birds in the fall. We see a little bird about this size zinging through the trees. Awfully tough bird to hit for hunters. How about giving you some lessons here on where to find grouse and how to bag them?
Oh, I should be pleased to, Fred. And let's just go along with my good friend Tom Prodzik and his dog, and you'll see some real action. But where do you go to find them? Well, here we see my wife, Ruth, and our two springers in an area where there are a lot of small crab apples and choke cherries and wild grapes. So you go where the food is. And invariably, that's where you're going to find some of the ruffed grouse and woodcock. And just like you or me, if we're hungry, we're going to a place like that where there's some food. And we'll do that with our expedition into the woods today in searching for ruffed grouse and woodcock.
Of course, it's important this year with ruffed grouse because of the various pockets around the state, the populations are a little lower.
That's right. In many areas, they're very, very low. But as an illustration, late one afternoon along a backwoods trail that I was familiar with the fact there was some clover planted along that trail. I shot this excellent ruffed grouse, and I decided I could tell from the feel of the crop of the bird that it was just full. And I opened the crop, and it was full of fresh clover leaves, definitely tying down what that bird had eaten for his evening meal. Not just 2 or 3 leaves, but the crop was just stuffed full of that fresh food. So again, go to find and go to search for your birds in an area where there's good food. Now let's get right into the bush country with Tom Prodzik and this famous Old Rock. And of all the dogs that I have seen or worked with and back of, I'd have to say that Old Rock was just one of the greatest of all times. And here again, along with my longtime friend Art Hutchings, we're going into an area south of Atlanta a little ways, into what the hunter refers to as typical scrub country, meaning there's some aspen, maple, oak, and a lot of shintangle, and it's in areas like that, and it's in areas just like that that you will find the foods that we've been talking about. But just watch Rock and his hunting mate, Lady, because the 2 finest bird dogs that I've ever crossed trails with in my life. And invariably when Old Rock goes on point, and Lady backs him, as you saw in the previous scene, out goes the woodcock, and Tom's an excellent shot, uses that Model 37 Ithaca, and usually the ruffed grouse and the woodcock hunter will use shot of size 7.5 or 8, sometimes 9. And they'll use a modified choke on the barrel, or perhaps cylinder improved, giving them a good wide pattern, because here you must shoot fast, you must shoot quick. But take your time, move along slowly, watch the dogs, and you're just almost assured of some action when you get into good pat and timberdoodle country.
Of course, the dog work on dogs like this is one of the most enjoyable things of hunting.
That's the rewarding part. A hunter can go afield and come home empty-handed, but he has had the thrill and the pleasure and the joys of working with good dogs, and certainly you have to classify these dogs as good ones, as I'm positive of. But not only will they point their game, most of the time Old Rock will make the retrieve and fetch right back, and then the hunter may have the privilege of examining that bird. And of course, from the woodcock standpoint, you haven't got a lot of flesh there like a great big rooster pheasant, but still it's a very choice edible item. On the wing again, and down they come. We'd had a real good day here in the area south of Atlanta, and as we come in, Another retrieve, and Tom pays credit and gives old Rock a thank you for a good job well performed. And finally back to the car, and you know, after you've hunted them all day, dogs are just like the next one. How about something to eat? And Tom always has that little scrap there for them.
Boy, I tell you, the dogs just really make an enjoyable trip,
yeah.
though.